Hi, and welcome to this live reading from A Beach Wedding to Die For by Judy Moore, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. All I know is I'd better hear the words I do come out of your mouth today. Amelia's mother shoved a hairpin harder than she meant to into her daughter's veil. Amelia squealed and pushed her mother's hand away. "Stop it, Mom, that hurt!" She glared at her mother's reflection in the mirror on the vanity table. Susan Warner pursed her lips and scowled at her daughter as she tacked the veil more gently into place. "Yes, well, your last 2 wedding fiascos hurt my pocketbook, too." The bride's older sister, Stephanie, sat on the bed across the luxurious suite of the Manatee Beach Hotel, texting her babysitter to be sure her 7-year-old twin boys were behaving. She'd voiced her irritation several times that children weren't allowed at the wedding. "Let's just hope the 3rd time is the charm," she said tersely with an eye roll. Her mother gave her older daughter a dismissive glance and turned her attention back to Amelia. "I'm not kidding, Amelia. These dramas at the altar have to stop." Amelia picked up the mascara wand, leaned closer to the mirror, and applied a light touch to the ends of her eyelashes. She batted her eyes several times and then smiled at her reflection in the mirror. "Stop worrying, Mom. Charlie's the one, I'm sure this time." Her mother let out a long sigh and lifted her eyes toward the heavens. She was a tiny woman with a short blonde haircut that gave her a pixie-ish appearance, but she packed a powerhouse personality when she was riled. "There was nothing wrong with Arthur," Mrs. Warner continued, as if she hadn't heard her daughter. "He was a perfectly nice young man. I was looking forward to having him as my son-in-law." Amelia shrugged and fluffed her blonde bangs with a comb. "I thought so too, until I was standing in front of him at the altar. I just knew I couldn't look at that boring face every day for the rest of my life." Her mother's face tightened. "He may have been a little boring, but he would have been a good provider. Those engineers make a lot of money. Isn't that right, Beck?" Beck O'Rourke set down the Knot magazine she'd been pretending to read as she peeked over the pages, watching Amelia and her mother squabble. "Please don't get me involved in this conversation," she thought uneasily. "I just want to walk down the aisle, see the ring go on her finger, and get the heck out of this 3rd bridesmaid's dress." "Yes, they do, Mrs. Warner," she responded politely from her seat on the sofa, quickly returning to the magazine. "A lot more than English majors, that's for sure." "And he was so smart. The valedictorian of your class, wasn't he?" Beck could feel Amelia's mother's eyes still on her, waiting for an answer. "He sure was," Beck answered with a nod. She'd been shocked when her boy-crazy best friend in high school told her she was marrying Arthur Ferguson, of all people. Arthur had filled out quite a bit since high school, and he looked almost attractive after growing a thick beard that hid his weak chin. But Beck suspected it was Arthur's Porsche convertible and oceanfront condo that had attracted Amelia more than his good looks and sparkling personality. Beck felt so sorry for him when Amelia bolted from the church, leaving poor Arthur standing there alone at the altar, staring out at over 100 shocked faces. She'd talked to him afterward, and in those few minutes he seemed to revert from a beaming, confident bridegroom back to that nerdy, nervous version of himself that she remembered so well from high school. "Then you went to the opposite extreme with that Neanderthal brick," Stephanie pointed out, clicking off her phone. "You should have known what he was like with a name like that." Beck giggled. Matthew Brick Burrows had been an all-star tackle on the Manatee Beach High football team her senior year. He undoubtedly was the best-built, best-looking guy in their class, but he was as dumb as his nickname. Brick won a football scholarship to the University of South Florida, but flunked out his freshman year before he ever played a game. "I couldn't stand him from the beginning," Amelia's mother said, taking a seat next to Beck on the couch. "I knew he'd cheat on you from the second I met him. All those muscles and that smarmy attitude of his. Like he was God's gift to women. I tried to warn you." Amelia shifted around in her chair and gave her mother a sly smile. "Well, I guess I got the last laugh, didn't I?" She certainly did. Beck couldn't believe the words that came out of Amelia's mouth when the minister asked her to recite her vows. No one could. Beck didn't remember all of it and wished someone had taken a video, but she did remember a few key phrases. "You've been cheating on me since the day you proposed to me. If you're wondering why Sylvia Mason isn't in the wedding anymore, it's because she told me you slept together last weekend. You're the last man on the planet I'd marry. I pity the woman who ends up with you." The church had gone totally silent, and Beck would never forget the look of shock on the faces of Brick's football buddies. She imagined a few of them would have serious second thoughts about ever playing around again. "Why are we talking about this anyway?" Amelia said with a pout. "This is my wedding day. I don't want to think about all that." She stood up and smoothed the flowing skirt of her tea-length white gown. This third wedding dress was more casual for a beach wedding than the first two, and Beck liked it much better. It was strapless with gorgeous lace embroidery at the top and a tulle skirt with an asymmetrical hemline. The bridesmaids' dresses were much less frilly, too. Strapless, knee-length, silk jersey in a beautiful shade of teal. Beck thought she might actually wear this one again. She shuddered to think how much she'd spent on the other two evening gowns hanging in her closet that she'd never dream of wearing again. Amelia's mother, whose dress was a lighter shade of teal, stepped forward to give her daughter a hug, visibly making a shift in mood. "You're right, of course, darling," she said soothingly. "That's all in the past. You and Charlie are perfect together. He has such a nice personality, he'll be a good provider, and he's even handy around the house." Mrs. Warner paused for a second and thought. "You know who he kind of reminds me of?" They all waited expectantly. "Marvin," she responded. Stephanie glanced over at her mother and smiled at the mention of her deceased husband, killed when a tree fell on his car during a hurricane 4 years before. Amelia put her hand over her mouth and whispered to her mother, "But a lot better looking." Her mother tried unsuccessfully to stifle a laugh. Beck heard the comment, winced, and hoped Stephanie hadn't heard it too. She looked over at Stephanie, who had stood up and was walking to the window. When she pulled back the drape, she immediately exclaimed, "Oh my God, there's Brick. What in the world is he doing here?" Chapter 2. Amelia and her mother scurried to the window to see Brick Burrows leaning casually against a column in front of a dress shop across Ocean Avenue, staring at the Manatee Beach Hotel. "Don't let him see you!" Mrs. Warner shrieked, tugging her daughter away from the window. "I hope he's not here to make a scene." Stephanie backed away from the window, too. "He was so angry after you jilted him, Amelia. There's no telling what he might do." Beck stood away from the window, but managed to sneak a peek, too. Brick was wearing a pair of jeans, a tight yellow sports shirt that really showed off his muscles. He looked even more buff than the last time she'd seen him, if that was possible. "Maybe we should call the police," Mrs. Warner suggested. "I don't want anything to go wrong with this wedding." Beck frowned. "You can't call the police because someone's standing in the street." She turned to the bride and asked, "Brick hasn't been stalking you or harassing you, has he, Amelia?" Amelia shook her head and appeared totally unconcerned. She lifted her chin and replied with a sniff, "This is the first time I've seen him in months. He's probably just curious, wants to see who beat him out to be my husband." "Well, it makes me nervous," her mother insisted. "Beck, go down and talk to him. Make sure he's not going to cause any trouble." Beck flinched. "Me? Why me?" The last thing Beck felt like doing right now was having a conversation with Brick Burrows. "You're the big detective. You'll be able to tell if he's up to something." Big detective? She'd solved one case, and suddenly she stuck running interference for the runaway bride. Just how far did her bridesmaid's duties go, anyway? "Mrs. Warner, I'm not a detective. I own a bookstore," Beck responded, though she had to admit she wasn't unhappy that others saw her as a detective. In fact, she liked the idea a lot. I know, but you solved that big case, and besides, you know Brick from high school." "Please, Beck," Amelia's mother pleaded. "I don't know what I'll do if something goes wrong with this wedding, too." Beck let out a long sigh and didn't even try to hide her dismay. Wasn't being a bridesmaid for an expensive third time enough? Especially for an old high school friend she'd barely seen in the 11 years since they'd graduated. Sometimes she wondered how she and Amelia had even become friends. They were so different. Probably because Beck had been so painfully shy in high school, and Amelia, though outgoing, had trouble making friends. So Beck had been recruited. Beck remembered just floating along, doing whatever Amelia wanted, which was how Amelia liked it. But after high school, they'd gone their own ways and now had virtually nothing in common. Seeing Beck's distress, Stephanie walked over and took her by the arm. Come on, I'll go with you. Strength in numbers. Beck groaned inwardly. If it were any other time than Amelia's wedding day, she would have put her foot down and refused. Okay, she agreed begrudgingly, but I'm not happy about it. The bride's mother's face lit up. Thank you, Beck. You're a dear for doing this for me. Then Mrs. Warner turned her attention to Stephanie. See if you can find your sister-in-law down there, she told her irritably. Greta should have been here already. It's only half an hour until the ceremony, and she's not dressed yet. Greta, the wife of Amelia and Stephanie's older brother Paul, was the last surviving bridesmaid. Amelia had started with 7 attendants at her first wedding. The number had slipped to 5 at wedding number 2, and now was down to just the 3 of them. The other 2 were the family, so it was a command performance for them. Why Beck had agreed again, she'd asked herself over and over again. Sometimes she was such a pushover. Her grandmother told her she was a glutton for punishment. A big part of the reason, though, was that Beck had become close friends with Stephanie. Beck had known her since high school, of course, when she spent so many afternoons at Amelia's house. Through the years, Beck began to realize that she had more in common with Amelia's sister than with Amelia. Stephanie was bookish, like Beck, and now was a regular at Beck's Beach Reads bookstore and coffee shop down the street. Stephanie was 2 years older, and had always seemed to Beck that Amelia got the looks in the family, while Stephanie got the brains. As she and Stephanie rode down in the elevator together, staring into the mirrored elevator door, Beck couldn't help but be pleased with how she looked in the bridesmaid dress. She'd never worn a strapless dress before, and the couple of afternoons she'd spent on the beach trying to even out her tan had really done the job. Her strawberry blonde hair fell behind her bare shoulders in soft curls, and the teal flats Amelia had chosen for walking in the sand looked great against her slim tanned legs. She glanced at Stephanie's reflection and saw her friend frowning critically into the mirror. You look so pretty, and I look so frumpy, Stephanie moaned, sucking in her pooch that did appear more visible in the silky dress. I wish I hadn't gotten a perm. My hair's too curly. You do not look frumpy, and I like the curls. They look so soft, Beck assured her. Her friend would never win any beauty contests, but she had the kindest, most sincere blue eyes of anyone Beck had ever known. Perfect for a teacher. She knew how much her students loved her. Stephanie pirouetted to see the back of the dress. I might even be able to wear this one again to a wedding or something. And I really like these shoes. I'm glad we don't have to wear heels again. Then she frowned and added with a sigh, I'm so sick of spending money I don't have on bridesmaids' dresses and shoes I'll never wear again. Beck definitely felt her pain, but didn't echo the complaint for fear it might get back to Amelia or her mother. Instead, she speculated. I thought maybe your sister or mother might have chipped in for yours? Stephanie's husband had died so unexpectedly at such a young age that he didn't have a life insurance policy. She had struggled ever since as the single parent of 2 boys on a teacher's salary. Stephanie gave her a you must be kidding look. Oh no, I'm sure it would never occur to either one of them. Some things never change, Beck commented sympathetically. Stephanie smiled ruefully. You're telling me. They were quiet for a minute, staring at their reflections in the elevator door before Beck elbowed her friend. Have you noticed that Amelia is working her way up the alphabet? First Arthur, then Brick, and now Charlie? Stephanie giggled and agreed. Let's just hope she doesn't make it to Zach.